Welcome to our monthly ACTS Town Hall. Thanks to our member companies for helping make these town halls possible. Your support makes our mission a reality. Together in safety, stronger in collaboration. The ACTS Town Halls are an open forum to discuss concerns and present potential solutions to improve damage prevention and excavation safety. These town halls are meant to be a discussion, and you're encouraged to ask questions and share solutions. A recording of this town hall will be posted on our YouTube channel and sent via email after the town hall has concluded. Before the end of the town hall, each of our panelists will highlight a moving forward step to ensure we stay focused on practical and impactful solutions. We are pleased to have a knowledgeable and experienced panel with us today. So to get us started, our moderator will begin with brief introductions.
Hey everybody, good morning. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, my screen is frozen, so I wanted to make sure that everybody could hear me at least speak. My name is Ashley Fugate. I'm the Vice President of Business Development and Damage Prevention for Pipeview America. I have been in business development and damage prevention for about 2 years. I do have a background in gas installation. I was the Chief of Operations for about 10 years in the natural gas sector here in Texas. I'll be moderating for you guys today, and I'm going to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves. So Aaron, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Hey guys and gals, my name is Aaron James. I'm with the Vermeer Corporation. We are a manufacturer of hydro excavation, vacuum excavation units. So I've been in the industry for a little over 15 years now, and happy to be on this call to discuss vacuum excavation and how it can potentially help you guys out in the field.
Thank you, Aaron. Mike, go ahead.
Hey, good morning, everyone. This is my name is Mike Iadanza. I am Senior Vice President over at Mason Private Locating. I've been in the industry for about 15 years, both on the public and private locating side of the fence, and we have crews throughout the country doing some of the work that we're talking about today.
Thank you, Mike. Robert, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Robert Cathers. I'm an area manager for Hinkles and McCoy. I oversee our East Region operations for Pennsylvania. About 20 years in the industry, 15 of that was on vac trucks, hydrovacs and airvacs. Been with Hinkles and McCoy for a little over 10 years now. Have about almost 30 vac trucks that are running daily out of our shop.
Thank you, Robert. And I want to thank all of you for being here today. And let's go ahead and get started. So the first question we have is, where have you seen vacuum excavation make the biggest impact on damage prevention? Aaron?
Yeah, so I think the biggest impact that vacuum excavation, it helps mitigate the risk of damaging underground utilities, right? That's really the ultimate driver of this. If we go back 20 years, right, trenchless was not as prevalent as it is today with the HDD market. So as we put more and more product underground, there becomes an ever increasing need for that vacuum excavation to expose those utilities and mitigate the risk of damaging those utilities, not only from a cost standpoint, but from a downtime standpoint for the end users or the actual consumer customers of those specific facilities.
I completely agree with that. Mike, do you have something to add to that coming from the private locating side? Like, what do you see, how that impacts what you guys do?
Yeah, so from MPL's perspective, the biggest impact is during utility verification and exposure in congested, high-risk environments like commercial properties, industrial facilities, active campuses, and definitely job sites with like aging or undocumented infrastructure. We're also seeing VAC-X used more frequently to trench and expose utilities in heavily congested job sites where traditional excavation introduces too much risk, right? In these situations, VAC-X allows our crews to safely uncover these utilities with precision and minimal disturbance. think Ashley might be frozen.
Yeah, I think Ashley's frozen. So, Robert, do you want to chime in on that
Yeah,
while Ashley?
perfect.
Yeah, I mean, one thing for us, and I think Mike, you kind of hit it pretty hard, is the records keeping. You know, a lot of these older utilities, we're starting to get into some of the replacement work for the cast iron, the bare steel. These, these files have been lost throughout the years. So approaching the work with vacuum excavation is definitely key to keeping our guys safe. I mean, I think we could all agree that's the goal of every day, is to make sure everybody goes home safely. And, it definitely gets rid of the risk of unnecessary hits, unmarked hits, or, unknown hits. So, we're utilizing them more and more outside of standard practices daily when it comes to installation of main services or just general maintenance as well.
Sorry about that, guys. I
No, you're good. We were just going to keep moving forward here.
Everybody just disappeared. Of course that would happen. I'm assuming we're still on question 1.
Yeah.
Okay. What I wanted to add to that is something that I'm seeing within the industry as well, is a lot of vacuum excavation. A big impact that's happening is we're being more proactive about these locates, right? Instead of waiting on those 811 tickets to get kicked back and come in, we personally at Pipeview, we've seen an influx in people wanting to get ahead of that. And I think that that's going to be a game changer for the industry, for sure. Let's see, we've got a question. Let's go ahead and Mark, I see that you have entered into this since I disappeared for a second. If you'll go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be great. And then if you have something to interject within that, go ahead and have that question.
Okay, I'm Mark Ledbetter. I'm regional manager for Vermeer Mid-South, our dealer group, and I cover all of Arkansas, our dealerships, and then the north half of Louisiana. Been in this for 30 years, which seems a little crazy to say out loud, but have seen it from the very beginning and how it's grown, and 100% behind it. I mean, I know Roger's been at some things where I literally did demonstrations with a vacuum excavator, even down to where we could cut a pallet in half, but then we had like a mock of a utility, but you put the pressure right on it and it doesn't harm the utility at all. So
awesome. Thank you for that. We'll go ahead and continue on. So what misconceptions still exist about vacuum excavation that are out in the field? We'll go ahead and let you answer that, since it seems like you've been at this a little bit longer.
I think initially, when I first got into it and vacuum excavation started coming out, people just thought it was too costly. Of course, the initial expense of it, and they didn't really see the value. But back then, most of the guys were spotting utilities with a Case 580 backhoe, and I actually owned my own for a while. And when you find it, chances are you've already damaged it when you do find it. But I think that was the biggest, problem with it initially. But I think just through the years, people have seen and get to using them. I remember we sold one contractor, he didn't want to buy it at all, but it was an AT&T contractor and they forced him to. And so like when we delivered it, he was mad. He was upset about having to buy it. Well, a few weeks later, I went back by to see him and he told me, he said, I don't know what I would do without it. So, once they get one and get used to it, they realize the benefits of it. So.
Yes, I can completely agree with that. In my time, I've watched it go from a large, backhoe into mini X's, which caused the same problem, just on a smaller scale, right? But Mike, we'll go ahead and let you interject with any answer to that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that vac X, it's slow, right? It's excessive, only necessary after something goes wrong. But in reality, it's most effective before excavation starts. And so, another misconception is it's like only needed for major utility crossings. And we see as much value using VAC-X at small exposures like services, where there's congested services or a lot of laterals. And those are the areas where we found on the private side where most of those damages occur.
That was good. That was a good answer. I like that.
Yeah, and the other thing is, the belief is it replaces locating, and it really shouldn't. It's a complementary to it, right? It's you do one, you're pretty safe. You do both, you become really safe.
Thank you. Robert, you have anything to add?
I mean, I think as an operator standpoint of the guys in the field that are actually operating the trucks, there's still a misconception that it's harder. It's more labor intensive than it would be a traditional crew. Now, if you go back 20 years ago, I'd probably agree with that. When I started out, it was who likes to get dirt thrown in their face all day long. But as time went on and these trucks have been developed and the manufacturers have listened to the folks out in the field that are operating them, the trucks are completely different now than what they used to be. They're so user friendly. The safety and the longevity of our employees are always put in mind when these trucks are being manufactured. And now, I go out there and visit crews, and they're standing there on the side of the road holding remote controls, operating the truck. 20 years ago, you had that hose slung over your shoulder, and you were getting after it to be able to get that hole, excavated. So we came a long way. So, that misconception should be pretty much eliminated at this point. And, we give major props to these companies like Vermeer that are designing these trucks and really keeping the operators in mind and the safety and longevity of their careers as well.
Absolutely. Aaron, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think I just want to touch on some of the points that Robert and Mike threw out there. I think they are correctly correct in saying that this is not a slower necessarily method for exposing utilities or mitigating risk. I think it's a far safer method, especially in those congested areas like we talked about. And I think, they've also think that it's going to replace skilled operators or skilled laborers. When in fact, again, as the market has a shortage of labor folks in the industry, I think this is another tool in a contractor or a customer's tool belt to be able to do that efficiently, whether it's a one-man operation in some cases, to be able to get out front of the excavation, to Mike's point, to where you can expose things prior to getting to that stage in the construction process.
Yeah, absolutely. I can completely agree with that, with some of the stuff that we do. And just to also add to Mike's point on, normally people look at this, a misconception is a lot of people think that this is for large spaces or large openings, and you can't get into the tight spaces. We can put in a clean out with a hydro excavation truck. So the other misconception is that it can only open up holes. There's so much other things that you actually can do and tools that are added to these trucks to make them a really great tool for more than just opening holes, to reduce damages and reduce that time being at a homeowner's home, or really you're not digging up an entire yard now. You're making that hole a little bit smaller. So those are some of the things that I see as well. We do have a question in the chat that I think is relevant to this, and it's what's the most common mistake you see crews make while they're potholing? Robert, do you want to go in on that since you're doing this day in and out?
I think I could say probably across the board, one of the biggest mistakes anybody can make when it comes to hydro excavating is not knowing the equipment that they're using. You really need to know that truck. If that means going back to the manufacturer, getting some extra training. All these trucks are different. They all operate different. There's a lot of intricate moving parts on the truck, and they are a lot more reliable now than they were 20, 30 years ago. But you need to know how to operate it. One mistake, you're moving a valve or a recert valve or something like that. You miss something like that, you could set off a chain reaction that, could have damage to the truck. That would be one. Know your equipment, know what you're doing. But the other thing too is, and one thing that I see is, especially with air vac, is more air pressure does not make the hole get dug faster. I see some crews use 220 psi or higher. All that's doing is it's just rocketing dirt into people's backyards, on their porch. It causes safety concerns. There's a lot of technique that comes into excavating using air and water. So making sure that you have a good technique down, and that if you don't know how to operate the truck or pothole with it, you speak up and ask for some guidance.
Absolutely. Does anybody else have anything to add to that one? Okay. Yeah.
I have one thing actually, if I can.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
Just on the speed of it, it is, I mean, they do view it as slower because they're not opening as big a hole, which is kind of beneficial in my opinion. But we do encourage our contractors to get their own line locator because, you know, you have damage prevention, whoever come out and locate the utility. If they have their own, and we've done it with them many times, get out there, hook to it and pinpoint it so they can find it left, right, instead of the wide window. And then they can hit it with just a standard hole instead of having to open up a really wide area instead of searching for it. We were on a demo once, and to warn y'all, I always tell a story about something, but the guys, they had a hole 4 foot deep, and I come out there with a line locator, went hooked onto it, and I found it. It was actually it was a drop, and it was actually less than 12 inches deep, less than a foot from the edge of this giant hole they had opened. And so it really improves their speed and their accuracy of the size hole they're opening with the vac.
And that's something that I was going to kind of add to this is a lot of, in my opinion, mistakes that get made with potholing is improper training. You know, we have a lot of companies come in and they are, you know, their stakeholder says we need to get this, you know, done quickly. And so they hire these guys and they don't give them proper training because they're worried about production and pushing those numbers. And if you've ever seen me present, I will pound stakeholder alignment in your head because I feel like these stakeholders need to align better with their contractors so they can give them more time for that training. So then we can reduce damages on the front end of this. Just by that alone, I think would help tremendously within the industry. So stakeholder alignment, I say all the time. You'll hear that from me constantly. So Mark, you've got your stories. I've got my word that I always say. But we'll go ahead and move on to the next one. So what factors, cost, time, training, or equipment, most often influence the decision to use it? So Mark and Aaron, with you guys selling these equipment pieces, I think it'll be really good to hear from y'all on this one. Because most people are coming to you and saying, hey, I need a truck and this is why. So what of those factors do you think are making people these to use it?
Yeah, I think it's a constant, you know, concern with production, longevity of production, right? I think a lot of folks, again, traditionally view VacX as a slower tool that will not necessarily be a value add, but it's something that is now being required in a lot of places as part of the job site or part of the bid specs that they are required to expose utilities with VacX. And I think to Mark's point earlier, a lot of the challenges that we've seen from the industry side, from a manufacturer side, is just the initial upfront cost, right? It is a hefty sum of money to get a customer into a VacX unit. But if you look at the overall scope of damages within the US, you know, and we throw around that $30 billion number like it's a small number, that's a massive number. And if each utility strike on average is around $8,000, you know, if you can mitigate a lot of those strikes by using VacX, not only does it long-term improve the efficiency on the job site, keeps people safe, but it also prevents a lot of unnecessary damages in that space.
I can completely agree with that. Mark, do you have something to add to Aaron?
On the training and everything, I mean, that is a thing that comes up a lot, but like I would say 90% of our vacs, that's a wild guess. The operator, as far as training on the vac, they're pretty simple. I mean, honestly, it's a giant shop vac, you know, so that training window is pretty small. The biggest thing is 90% of them, you have to have a CDL to either tow it or to drive the truck. So I think that's that's a big issue with contractors because they're having a hard time finding CDL drivers anyway, so.
And Mike, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, they're right. I mean, it's, cost from our perspective when we hear, right, cost is usually a first concern, but time and awareness tend to be, the real drivers. When teams, I think when Aaron said it, when teams understand how much time is lost dealing with a strike, shutdowns, repairs, reporting, then the decision becomes easier, right? Training and access to these equipment could be barriers, especially for smaller contractors. But those are solvable by hiring professionals like we have on, here leading this panel. The biggest hurdle is often cultural, getting the teams to move from, we've always done it this way to be more proactive in thinking and getting this stuff done prior.
And Robert?
I think everybody kind of hit it, but yeah, to just kind of reiterate Mike's point, I mean, at a cost side of it, I mean, we started out a couple years ago with these hydrovacs, and we've organically grown production and installation of gas main. So it's paid for itself over a couple times in just the past couple years. So, and yeah, it's a cultural change. It's not always going to be welcomed with open arms, but after some time and everybody sees the benefits that it brings to the table, not only financially for a company's aspect, but for the operator out in the field as well, it does become embraced. So
Yes, I can agree with everybody here on that stance. For us, we do a lot of our own in-house, hydrovac for that reason. Training, like Mark said, there's not a whole lot to it. We train, we retrain. It doesn't take a long time to get that done. The biggest hurdle we see is the CDL drivers, especially now that has a bigger impact on getting a CDL. It's not as easy as it used to be, which is a good thing, but then bad for people that are trying to do it the right way. So those are the only things that we can see on the training side that kind of sits us back a little bit. But there's so many different providers for vacuum excavation that I feel like if that's what's keeping you from doing that with your company, just go to someone that has that expertise instead of putting that money in that rig until you can have that training piece added to your company. So there's good alternatives. You don't have to go and spend that initial money up front. There are expertise in this field, and there's several companies that would be more than willing to help you out with that. So let's go ahead and move on to the next question. How does vacuum excavation support compliance with state dig laws and damage prevention best practices? So Robert, I'm going to start with you, and if you'll just remind everybody what state that you're in, that way we can get a better understanding of maybe how it differs as well.
yeah, I'm in Pennsylvania. It's standard PA one call laws. It helps out with exposing tolerance zones. Like I said, we use this for our vac trucks. Part of our vac truck fleet we use for installation of pipelines. So the truck goes out, they dig out the tolerance zone ahead of the main crew that's coming in behind to install that pipeline. So that definitely helps out and keeps us in compliant with exposing those tolerance zones. Having true tolerance zones marked out reduces our hits, tremendously. So I'm not an expert on PA one call law, but I do know that that's one big thing that it's helping us out with in our line of business.
And Mike, do you have something to add?
Yeah, so we are based out of Indiana, but do all this work throughout the Midwest and some, other states. And as we know, dig laws and state dig laws can vary from state to state. But Robert hit the nail on the head. By exposing utilities, we're verifying location, depth, and alignment even before excavation. And, it reduces the reliance on tolerance zones and assumptions. From our standpoint, it demonstrates due diligence, supports the excavation, safe excavation practices. And it shows, the owners that, you went above and beyond to try to reduce these damages, and you're using these multiple services to make the job site safe for anybody who works in and around them.
Mike, Aaron, do you all have something to add to this?
Yeah. So what Mike's point, I think it shows that the contractor or person performing the work has taken that reasonable care to expose and mitigate that risk. So if there is a potential strike down the road with another thing, with another location, it's like, hey, we can go back to the contractor and say, hey, did you take all the necessary steps in order to mitigate and do your due diligence for locating that line non-destructively? So I think Mike nailed it.
Awesome. Thank you. And Mark?
Only that, like where I live in the very northwest corner of Arkansas, it's one of the fastest growing population centers in the US. I mean, it's unreal how quick they're building. And so not only state laws, but we are seeing more and more local cities, municipalities and stuff are requiring it for just at a local level too, not even including the state. So
Yes, I can contest to that because I've been in quite a few meetings this week with local municipalities for the state of Texas, and they're also starting to require that and buy their own trucks as well as getting onto the 811 system. I think with compliance, a lot of these companies just, if you're working in a different state, we need to make sure that we are complying with the, state mandated 811 since it differs everywhere you go. So that's super important. What role does documentation and verification play when vacuum excavation is used for exposure? Robert, I'll let you start off on that one.
Yeah, so we, I saw there was a chat that popped up about, locating prior to utilizing the vac truck. We are one of our customers right now that we're working for. They have very limited records. Some of these lines are very old, 50 plus years. So we're utilizing the hydrovac. We obviously try to use as much located equipment as possible to get us in the general vicinity of where that line is. But utilizing the hydrovac to locate that facility and to redline those drawings, make a sketch of where that facility is. It's very important. I mean, I don't think there's any other way to do it. If you get out there with a locating box or traditional locating, I mean, you're guessing at that point if you don't know where that is specifically when it was installed. And you're still going to hand dig or you're going to expose it to verify it or install a test station or some sort of wires for future locating. So these hydrovacs play a crucial role in locating that and also installing, those test stations for future locates to be completed. And unfortunately, there's a lot out there. So there's a lot of work out there for these trucks and a lot of facilities that need to be located, now.
Yes, I completely agree with a lot of facilities that need to be located. There's too many people that don't know where their lines are. That is for sure. Mike, you want to add to that?
Yeah, as far as documentation, what does it play? Documentation is critical. VACX without proper documentation to me misses half the value. We emphasize all of our technicians in the field, photographs, proper measurements, notes, clear reporting once the facility is exposed. How we do it, our partners get those deliverables at the end of each working day and when the project is completed through our customer portal. So they basically get it through a link. The documentation also protects everyone involved, the owner, the contractor, the utility, and it basically creates a verified record of what's actually found. It also helps in resolving disputes pretty quickly when downstream, when you have all that documentation as a backup, and you're not just relying on what was seen at that site at that time.
Yes, absolutely. And to add to that, we also, whenever we go into documentation side of our hydrovacs, we have it where our customers can get that in real time. And that helps them if they have any issues at the moment. And we've also taken it a step further and we drop some type of marker ball, some type of whisker, something that can be located again, especially if it was unlocatable to start off with. So not only are we, GPS sticking that into a GIS document, but we're allowing it to where the locator can then come back and actually locate this facility in the future. Now, this is me, hoping for the best, but what we would love to see from our company standpoint is when we go out and do this, especially if something was not able to be located to begin with, and we're having issues with it, is all this documentation. We would love to be able to send it back to Texas 811 and have them update their maps. That way, if something happens to it in the future, they have that documentation, as well as the stakeholder, as well as having that marker ball down there, and just kind of hitting that from various points instead of it housing within pipe view, because you can call a locate ticket out, but no one knows if they called Mason to come out and locate it or pipe view to locate it, or if you only know if it's on the 811 ticket who located it. And if it wasn't anybody on there, it's just a good track record with that. That way we know who was there, who did the documentation, and where it's housed. So that would be something really amazing to see in the future, is to be able to send that back to 811 and have those documents readily available.
I'm looking at
Aaron,
the comments and I see a lot of people agreeing with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it would be great. Somebody help me with this, guys. Let's do it. We're more than willing to do it. Let's do it. Aaron, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I think to just reiterate what everyone's already said, because you guys have done a fantastic job with this one. It's just, we've taken the time and done our due diligence to expose the utility. We have to get that documentation uploaded into a GIS platform somewhere, right? We need to be able to update those records future state. There is nothing but more and more infrastructure going underground every day. And if we don't continue to start managing that data set for what's going in, plus mapping and locating the existing facilities, right? We're basically just opening ourselves up as an industry to additional risks down the road as those come up for replacement or rehab work. So again, getting that documentation, you've done the work, now document it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of because we have a lot of cross board that we do. And it's one of those things that it's hard for us to look at it as we go to these cities and they're like, we don't have documentation of any of our infrastructure. In the back of our heads, we just went through there for the gas company. Why are we not helping give them that? We're there. We're already there. We have that documentation. If we were able to send it to an 811, for instance, or even if the city would work with us to get them that documentation, imagine what would already be located, that you're not going out 2 and 3 times a year or more, because everybody's working in the same right away, right? Everything's going in the same space. Mark, do you have something to add to that?
No, not really, other than, sorry, I had to step out for a moment. I told Aaron I was working from home today and I've got 4 truckloads of Colorado river rock for a giant landscape project my wife wrote me into. And I said, they were supposed to have been here 2 hours ago. I said, they'll show up as soon as the meeting starts. So
yeah,
I should be back for a few minutes.
You're good. You're good. And I just want to say in the chat, Bob put that there's so many wasted opportunities there. And I completely agree with that. There is a lot of wasted opportunities when it comes to documentation side of things. Excuse me. Okay, so how do you justify the upfront cost of vacuum excavation compared to the long-term savings? Mike, we'll go ahead with you.
Yeah, I would say justify it by looking at the total project risk and not just a line item cost, right? One damage can easily exceed the cost of multiple, vacuum excavations when you factor in repairs, downtime, crews delays, emergency response, liability, all of that. From MPL's experience, VacX is an investment in certainty. When you prevent one strike, it'll typically pay for itself, often many times over.
Yes, I completely agree. Sorry, I got choked up for a second.
Don't choke on us here.
I know, right? Mark, go ahead.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. It's thunderstorming here. I got 10,000 things going on. I think the biggest way to justify it is from having my own drilling business years ago, which so glad I got out of that. But is my biggest expense all the time was downtime. It's not the equipment. It's not because you have a damage out there and you got a crew shut down for a day or two. So not only the cost of repairing the damage, especially if it's your fault, but just the downtime was what was just a huge factor. So I think, and these guys know that. So on the sales end of it, when we're talking to them about it, that's a pretty easy one to overcome.
Yeah, I can completely agree with that, Mark. I working for a boring company, I saw the same thing kind of happen. Aaron, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say Bob had commented that, you know, a lot of folks don't ultimately see the value in VAC-X until there is a major event, you know, or a major incident, right? So we want to talk about it proactively, you know, to get contractors and installers on the front end to mitigate the risk before we have to deal with the consequences of the after effects of an incident.
Yeah. And Robert, to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, safety for the people that are out there doing the work. That's number one. You know, production. The truck will add production to whatever you're doing as long as you're utilizing it in the correct way. But the main thing is safety. We had an incident that occurred on one of our customers' properties a couple years ago that resulted in one of their employees losing his life, and it was due to a type of fitting that was installed on a gas main. And we went into a remediation process of doing this a couple years ago to these existing fittings. And, you know, we were getting one or two done a day. Went back to our company and said, we should be using hydrovacs to expose these to get more accomplished. And, you know, we unfortunately used that scenario that played out to get these fittings remediated in a quicker time than what it would have taken if we were using conventional methods. So safety is number one. I mean, you can't put any kind of dollar figure on, you know, keeping the people safe, the general public safe, and making sure our guys are going home.
I completely agree with you, Robert. Mike, did I get you or did I?
You did. Yeah, I think
okay, I was making
started that
sure.
one off.
Sorry, I got choked up for a minute and then I
No,
forgot what was happening.
it's all good. I thought it was my answer that choked you up. But
yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. So the next question is, how do you see vacuum excavation evolving over the next 3 to 5 years? And we're going to let Robert start out on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen big steps in the past couple of years of vacuum excavation, but from as a contractor, natural gas contractor standpoint, we're starting to use these trucks. Well, we have been using these trucks for a while now, not just for locating, but for actual gas repair, specifically emergency gas repair. You know, you get there, you get to a leak, you make your emergency one call, you got 2 hours, you got to wait. You know, a lot can happen in those 2 hours. You know, these vac trucks are a less invasive way to get into that leak and start exposing that facility to make those repairs. Working with manufacturers such as Vermeer, you know, we're building these trucks to suit the needs of the operators, whether if they're just doing line locates or if they're actually doing mechanical work on pipelines. So I see that the vac trucks are going to be a more critical role in maintenance of natural gas facilities in the near future. And you know, also as a cost saving aspect to municipalities and boroughs using keyhole technology, core boring technology. I know Vermeer makes some core bores that we use off of them. You know, it's going to work hand in hand. So I'm excited to see the future. I think excavators and backhoes are always going to have a place in natural gas construction, but I think the hydrovacs are really stepping up to the plate to make it a safer option for when we dig these facilities up.
I think that was a very well-versed answer, and I can completely agree with that. And I honestly have nothing to add on my end for that one. But Mike, will let you go ahead and add to it.
Yeah, Robert nailed it. You
yeah,
know, yeah, but I expect it to be more standardized, right? I expect it to be more expected and not just optional. Ultimately, like in my opinion, VAC-X will be viewed as a routine step in responsible excavation. and not just a specialty service.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark?
Sorry, I was out of pocket there for a minute. Which question are we on? I'm so sorry.
No, you're okay. So, how do you see vacuum excavation evolving in the next 3 to 5 years?
Honestly, several years ago, they came to us as a dealer and told us that at some point in the future, that Vacuum X would actually exceed our need for the directional drills. And to be honest, we thought they were crazy. But we are seeing that come to fruition. I mean, it's our biggest growing segment. Just had meetings with the owner yesterday over, like our market share and then how many units we've sold a year. And it's of all, I think we make 200 and something different pieces of equipment, but it's by far the fastest growing. I've got vacs on order right now that won't even be built until November. So
That's awesome. Aaron, would you like to add
Yeah.
to that?
Yeah, to reiterate to Mark's point, this is by far the fastest growing segment in the excavation space. Vac trucks 20, 30 years ago were uncommon. You would see those in those specialty applications. Now, to Mike's and Robert's points earlier, this is becoming more of a standard practice and a standard piece of equipment that we are seeing on any utility installation job, whether it be from a SUE contractor who's doing mapping or laying out utilities in a congested right of way for being able to move those facilities or readjust as new construction is going up, or whether it's mitigation for existing utilities that need services or repairs done. So we just continue to see that trend. And I know, if you look at industry trends over the past few years, I know this market is supposed to grow on a very conservative basis at a compounded rate of 10% year over year for the next decade plus, right? So again, huge opportunity in this space as more and more contractors and facilities require this as part of standard practice.
Yes, I absolutely
Also
agree.
to
I was
add-
actually gonna comment on the standard practice because a lot of utilities are making this a standard practice, but I'm also seeing smaller contractors as well, fencing companies, things of that nature. They're making they're putting the shovels down, right? And they're going to hydro excavation as well. So as we see that trend change, not only through our industry partners that we work currently with now, but just even smaller trades that are outside of the industry. It's really taking off, that's for sure. So Dwayne has asked a really, really good question in the chat, but I'm going to go ahead and move on to our last two and then come back to that one. So I'm not ignoring you, Dwayne. We're going to get there, I promise. So moving on. So what role should utilities, municipalities, and regulators play in encouraging a wider adoption? I wanted to move on to this question because I feel like it really complements what we just talked about with the 3 to 5 years. So just kind of like a high level, simple answer to that, because I feel like that question really is just continuing from the last question. What role do y'all think that they should play to? I feel like they already encourage that quite well throughout all sectors. But what is y'all's thoughts on that? Mark, I'll let you go ahead and lead this one off.
I mean, I would just, in my opinion, and I've been in many meetings with different, utilities, municipalities and everything, but I encourage them to require it. I mean, to me, there's no downside. There's no negative to them making it a requirement in their area or, for whatever product they have in the ground. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. Aaron, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think it basically just goes back to damage prevention as a whole, right? Which is really ultimately the topic of this conversation, right? If we go up 30,000 feet, how do we continue to do better as an industry to mitigate that $30 billion industry amount, on an annual basis? And VACX plays a huge part of that. Hopefully we don't get to a stage in the game where it becomes a mandate. We'd like to encourage folks to use that as a standard practice, right, to just prevent and mitigate the damage, less being mandated to use that. But, unfortunately, I think it'll come to a mandate because a lot of folks don't do things until they're told they have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, I agree. Mike, I can see the wheels turning. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, they should play a huge role, right? By setting the expectation and leading by example. Having clear guidance in their processes and their communication, both internally and externally, consistent messaging, what we're doing here, right? Education is also key. I mean, we're throwing on this really great webinar, right? Helping stakeholders understand when and why, VACX should be used. And, when utility owners and municipalities prioritize damage prevention, the industry follows, or at least they should follow, right?
Yes, I completely agree with that, Mike. And what you said is exactly what I spill out all the time. If utility owners, adopt it and they make it a requirement, then everybody will fall suit. And it goes back into the same thing of stakeholder alignment. Your contractors, your subcontractors are going to align with your stakeholder. That is who they are, taking all of that from, and that's who they want to get. Sorry, my phone's blowing up. That is exactly who these contractors want to look up to, and they want to book their standards off of them, right? If the utility is not requiring it, the contractor is not going to put it in their bid, and they're not going to think it's something that they need to do until it's too late. Robert, I'll let you go ahead and go and say more to that point as well.
Yeah, I think you hit it. It's the utility owners that advocate for it. Luckily for us, our two major utility owners that we work for are huge advocates of hydro excavation or air excavation. We work in probably 100+ different municipalities across the state of Pennsylvania, and we just adopted that practice early on with our partners at the utility company that we work for, and over the years. We get phone calls from those municipalities that they don't require it, they don't expect it, but we'll get phone calls from those municipalities saying, hey, I have an engineering firm here putting in a beautification project. We have no idea where these lines are. Do you mind come out and helping us out? So they're relying on us as well. So I guess the biggest thing is making sure that we're getting ahead of it. We know it's coming. Like Aaron said, and like Mark said, it's going to become a requirement. So the ones that are going to start acting like that now and getting ahead of it are the ones that are going to be successful in the future.
Yes, absolutely. Quit. One of those things, quit putting it off, because you're going to have to do it eventually. You might as well be ahead of the game and not behind. And we'll go ahead and we'll ask the last question that we have here, and then we'll go to Dwayne's. What advice would you give organizations just beginning to integrate the vacuum excavation into their damage prevention programs, or if they're, integrating it at all for any reason? Mike, go ahead. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
That's good. I'd say start strategically, not everywhere at once. Identify high-risk scenarios, congested areas, shallow utilities, poor records, and use it there first. Invest in training. So, your field crews understand the how and the why, and they can then determine if it is or if it is not needed. And lastly, partner with an experienced, damage prevention professional, like we are here today. Build that documentation into your process from day one. The goal isn't just compliance, it's confidence in knowing what's in the ground before you start doing your work.
Absolutely. Robert, what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, starting out from somebody that started, vacuum excavation crews from scratch, I would say one of the most important things is identifying your crew members and making sure they believe in the same mission that you believe in. We're here for damage prevention. That's, if that's your goal, that's your mission, you want to locate these lines and prevent damages, make sure they are aligned with you. Start off small. You don't have to go out and buy a fleet of vac trucks. Start out with with one, get your feet wet with that one, and then start moving forward. And don't be afraid to use it for things outside the box. These trucks They're not designed just to dig holes. They could be used for a wide variety of things. So, and then, like you said, talk to professionals that are utilizing these trucks and build that network, and you will be successful with it.
Absolutely. Aaron, Mark, do y'all have anything to add?
Yeah, I think to Robert's point, I think getting the right guys and the right teammates on board with the mission is critical. And then to Mike's point, just making sure that from a company standpoint that you invest in the training, because again, to both their points, right? These units are not designed specifically just for potholing or opening up, congested areas, right? There's a multitude of uses, and we continue to see different uses and customers adapt to various needs across the country and globally with the product. So again, it's another tool, but I think more importantly than just being a tool, right? It's starting a cultural shift in the industry to think more about prevention and less about production, right? I mean, well, production will ultimately follow, but you got to take those initial steps and be that early adopter in this space, which we're seeing a lot of folks get on board with that.
Yes, absolutely. And to Robert's point about starting out small, I think that would be my biggest, advice to give is, even if you have to hire somebody to come out and do it for you for a little while, buy something small. And to Mike's point, those very critical areas, look at what you're doing there and really weigh your options. Do you have the time for training and such for 4 trucks? Start small, buy one. If you have the jobs and again, there's enough service companies that'll come out and help you get caught up. And then once you're able to grow, then bam, you've got a whole fleet and you're doing better than anybody else is. And you can start making money off of those as well as helping, with what you've got going. That's exactly the model that we set up at Pipeview. We started out small. It was literally just for us. And now we're actually doing hydrovac work and have a fleet of hydrovacs that's bringing in that revenue. So there's nothing wrong with starting out small, hiring a service company to help you out, and then getting to where you actually have a fleet of trucks and bringing revenue in from it. So we're supposed to stop at
owning
11.
a vac truck is like owning a boat, right? The best boat is someone else's, right?
Yes.
let someone else get the vac truck and deal with
Yep.
all the issues, and you just call them and let them do the work for you.
Yeah. Yes. So we're supposed to end at 11:20. We're going to go over just a little bit because I really want to make sure that we answer Dwayne's question. So we'll just let maybe one or two of you answer this in the sake of time. So Dwayne said, can you comment on standards for operations when close to the utility, specifically reduced pressures and temperatures, water versus air? So I feel like this either needs to be answered from Aaron and Mark, or maybe even Robert, because Robert, I know you mentioned some air vac. I am not versed in air, so I'm going to leave that one alone. And I know that Mike isn't either. So we'll go ahead and let one of y'all answer that one.
Go ahead.
I would say first and foremost, whatever you're utilizing and whoever you're working for, refer to their operation manual first. Your customer. Your customer could have something in place that already calls out specific pressures, or water versus air. So that's first and foremost. Know what your customer requires. For us, our standard practice when we're using hydro excavators is we try to maintain 6 inches of clearance away from the utility. We don't exceed 1500 PSI when we're utilizing water, and we utilize a 360 nozzle just to keep that water consistently moving. When we operate with air, our air is only increased to 150 PSI. Like I said earlier in the call, technique over power all the time. When it comes to air, it's always technique over power. You got 220 PSI, 250 PSI. I mean, to me, I could dig a hole 4 foot by 4 foot, 4 foot deep, and the same amount of time with 150 PSI than a guy that doesn't know what he's doing with 250 PSI. It's all about technique. That's going to eliminate exposure to flying dirt and debris, injuries, pedestrian injuries, things of that nature. But long story short, I mean, the biggest thing is make sure you're operating under your customer specific operating conditions.
Aaron, did you have anything to add to that?
No.
Because that was an excellent answer.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Robert nailed it, right? It's just
Yeah.
knowing the product that you are working around, right? Whether it's a water main or a service, or it's an old clay pipe, knowing what utilities are potentially in that area. And then knowing again what your stakeholder, or the person, bidding the work you're working for, knowing what their requirements are, because again, like Robert said, a lot of times, especially in the gas world, they have very stringent requirements around digging around their facilities, right? Not to exceed 1500 psi. In some cases, there may not be restrictions, but again, using caution and care and technique over just brute power is definitely a great answer to that. So I don't have anything to add else.
Yes, I absolutely agree, Robert. That was an absolute amazing answer. I think my favorite thing about this entire industry is whether it's, in my everyday life or in this industry, knowing your environment, your surroundings, and having patience is those three key things that will help you in everything. So just like Robert said, knowing what the specs are, knowing what you need to work with, knowing your PSI, knowing your environment that you're in, paying attention to your surroundings and what you're working within and what you're working around so no one gets hurt, and having that patience and not using that brute force. So you can put that into your home life, your utility life, however you want to enter that into your world, it works with those three key things. So knowledge is very much the key. So thank you for asking that question. And then so for the remainder of what time we do have, which I don't think is very long, if you can just do like a 30,000, view of what your key takeaways were from this meeting, that would be great. And Mark, we'll just start with you.
Okay. The key takeaway, I mean, we've known this was coming for a long time. Aaron works for a corporate. Once again, I work for the dealer groups, but like I say, we've been seeing this coming. Vermeer, like I said, I don't know how many pieces of equipment we build. They're a worldwide company. Aaron may know the figure, I don't, but I would be willing to bet with everything they spend on innovation, because they're never sitting still. I mean, every time we're at the factory, there's always something new coming out, but they're doubling the size of one of our vac manufacturing facilities. But I would be willing to bet that the biggest investment Vermeer worldwide is making right now is vacuum excavation by far.
I can completely agree with that. Mike, your view?
Yeah, my key takeaway is that VacX is no longer a nice to have. It may not be a must have, but it certainly is a proven damage prevention tool. And obviously with us being located and pairing those both services, you call public, you got a pretty good, safe job site. You call public and private, you got a really safe job site. And then when you throw in something like VacX into that, to me, it's the future of damage prevention is about verification and not assumptions. And VacX is going to be a critical part of that future.
Absolutely. Aaron?
Yeah, no, I think Mike nailed it, right? It is definitely something that we continue to see growth in. Like to Mark's point, it is definitely the largest growing segment in the excavation space as a whole. So if you look at AEM stuff, they said VacX is by far exceeding the growth, even, if you go back to the 50s and 60s for excavation, right? So again, I think folks are starting to see the value and the benefits of the equipment from a safety standpoint. But I think the biggest thing is know the equipment, know your surroundings, and if you are using the equipment, make sure you get the proper training, right? Whether that's through a local manufacturer or a service provider, but make sure that you are using the equipment safely and you can use it to its fullest potential.
Yes, absolutely. And Robert, your key takeaways.
Yeah, it's here to stay. Like Mike said, it's something that is just going to get bigger and bigger. As for myself as a contractor out there, installing the pipe, we couldn't do our jobs anymore without it. It's extremely important. If I don't have a hydrovac out on one of my main crew's jobs, I mean, they're pretty much coming to a standstill at this point. It's a very big necessity. We've seen the fruits of the labor. The upfront cost is sometimes hard to swallow when you see these trucks, but the organic production that you grow over time with them is truly amazing. So yeah, it's here to stay, and we're embracing it as a company.
Absolutely. I'm going to piggyback off of Robert's comment that he just made. I think that was the perfect way to put it for, what I was going to say to that point. But for the sake of time, we're going to end this thing. And I appreciate Roger and the team allowing me to moderate this. And I appreciate our panelists for the day and for today and everybody that attended.